Leftist scum are being taught not to lie. American Broadcasting Company is being sued for deceiving viewers about Charlie Kirk. That's tens of millions of dollars in fines. Or maybe it's even worse. I'll tell you now who's suing. The United States Ministry of Informatics, or as we call it, the Federal Communications Commission. The head of this Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Communications Commission, is Brandon Carr. In shock from the lies reported by an American Broadcasting Company show host, a certain Jimmy Kimmel, who said that Kirk's killer was a follower. A Trump representative, a Republican, a white chauvinist, and a Make America Great Again member. That is, he was simply lying. Not that he was mistaken, he was lying, knowing, for sure, knowing that he was lying. American Broadcasting Company didn't stop him. Well, let's say it's just one person, right? But they have editors, censors, directors, producers, and so on and so forth. No one stopped or interrupted him. They just let it slide, right? But then they didn't go on air and say that it wasn't true. The owner of American Broadcasting Company now is Disney, and actually Disney as a company could lose not just a couple dozen million. Well, they'll survive that, yes, but also the right to broadcast television programs in the United States of America. I think Disney isn't very happy, and I suspect that they're already, so to speak, on their way to the Federal Communications Commission, or already sitting on the doorstep trying to figure out what they need to do to, well, let's say, beg for forgiveness. But let's figure out who said what exactly, and how it resonated and will continue to resonate across the country. Why can the Commission, first of all, shut down American Broadcasting Company? Isn't this an act of revenge by the Republicans against the Democrats? No, it's not.
This is happening at a time when the audience that Jimmy Kimmel regularly radicalizes and deceives, given the American Broadcasting Company news platform, which, by the way, is funded by taxpayers, with luxurious and generous gifts from the federal government. For the American Broadcasting Company broadcasting network, they have serious legal obligations, which are to tell the truth. Please show the tweets, Clyde. American Broadcasting Company news must tell the truth. They must act in the public interest. This is stated in their broadcasting charter granted to them by the federal government.
In other words, the United States government allows American Broadcasting Company, as well as all the other so-called network broadcasters, to use transmission stations, satellites, cables, and so on. In the event that American Broadcasting Company remains neutral politically, it's hard to say. Yes, that's a point. But the main thing is not to deceive. To deceive is intentional. To deceive, yes. And not to deceive the citizens of America. The word intentional is very important.
I'm going to show you a clip where Jimmy Kimmel accuses Charlie Kirk of his own murder. That's exactly what happened. There's no other way to call it. This is Jimmy Kimmel accusing Charlie of lying about the nature of his killer, who is a hardcore far-left political extremist, a supporter of transgender ideology, living with a transgender boyfriend. This is the person who killed Charlie. He hated Charlie Kirk. Here is Jimmy Kimmel saying that actually it was the right wing who killed Charlie Kirk, and that means Charlie Kirk deserved it, and that Charlie Kirk actually created the conditions. He's to blame for his own murder. Listen to this.
Some new lows over the weekend as the Make America Great Again gang desperately tried to portray the guy who killed Charlie Kirk as someone else, not one of their own. They did everything to score political points, while grief persisted amid mutual accusations. On Friday, the White House lowered the flags, which drew some criticism.
And here's what Jimmy Kimmel said. Jimmy Kimmel says that one of them, that the killer was obviously one of them. This is an obvious and completely provable malicious lie. Now let me explain. The prosecutor yesterday who is handling this case in YUTE spoke to the whole world and forever dispelled the lie that Taylor Robinson was from the right.
Here's what the investigation found about the killer's identity and motives. Robinson's mother
explained that over the past year or so, Robinson had become more politically active and started leaning to the left, becoming more focused on supporting gay and transgender rights. She stated that Robinson began dating his roommate, a biological male who was in the process of transitioning. This led to several discussions with family members, but especially between Robinson and his father, who have very different political views. In one conversation before the shooting, Robinson mentioned that Charlie Kirk would be holding an event at Utah Valley University, which Robert Robinson called a stupid place for an event. Robinson accused Kirk of spreading hatred. When asked why he did it, Robinson explained that there is too much evil in that guy, meaning Charlie Kirk. He spreads too much hatred.
There is no doubt that Robinson was a leftist with a brainwashed mind. No, he actually wasn't. Well, definitely not now. And American Broadcasting Company and the others are never wrong. Editor. No, out of ignorance they blatantly lie. Editor. So,
American Broadcasting Company News is maliciously lying about the worst act of political violence in American history. These are the kinds of lies, omissions, victim-blaming, slander, and malice that paint a target on President Trump's back. Charlie Kirk, me, my family.
and here is the hero of our saga, Jimmy Kimmel, very pleased with himself. And when
With all these terrible events, you would think that our president would at least try to unite us, but he didn't. President Obama did, President Biden did, Presidents Bush and Clinton did, President Trump did not. Instead, he blamed the Democrats for their rhetoric. Donald leans over and taps it lightly as if hoping the ketchup will come out. And she didn't really answer. Maybe that's their signal. My diaper is full. I don't know. And then we went to New York for a Yankees game. Slow DiMaggio showed up at Yankee Stadium after appearing last week at the United Service Organizations, but that's all part of his tour where he gets booed. That's not how an adult grieves a friend's murder. That's how a child mourns a goldfish. I understand.
You know, I would forgive that heartless, hateful scoundrel if he were even a little bit funny. He's supposed to be a comedian, and now this girl is supposed to be some kind of model.
She was a contestant on a show called America's Next Top Model. Oh, Charlie Kirk, do you like terrorism? Oh, Kazako, I think the only thing that went wrong that day was...
Trump wasn't standing behind him and didn't get the pulse second. The model, she's just as ugly on the inside as she is on the outside. That brings me to Jamela Hill, the former entertainment and sports programming network host, a racial provocateur who keeps lying and spreading deliberate misinformation. Listen to what she says about the man accused of killing Charlie.
After Charlie's murder, there was an incredible amount of angry rhetoric from the right.
They blame the Democrats. They blame the liberals. They say, this happened because of you. And then it turns out, surprise, a 22-year-old white guy loved guns. He was raised by both parents, lived in a good family, and his father was a priest. Also, the sheriff didn't fit any of those stereotypes you thought he would confirm, right?
Well, he checked all the boxes I expected. Jamel, he's an extremely left-wing trans activist who repeats the same nonsense as you. He claims that Charlie was spreading hate because the left calls the truth hateful. His father wasn't a sheriff, but it seems like he comes from a decent family. It just shows that coming from a decent, God-fearing family, it's not enough to protect a sick mind from toxic left-wing indoctrination. And did Jamela really accuse Republican conservatives of hateful rhetoric? I mean, how dare we be angry that a brilliant young man was killed in front of his children? How dare we condemn those who celebrate this disgusting act of domestic terrorism? And be wary of those who claim that this isn't about left or right, that it's not political, that there's no clear motive. That's a lie, and we're not going to put up with lies. We won't tolerate blatant lies and manipulation from the left, including this from Columbia Broadcasting System.
5 days after the murder of Charlie Kirk, the shooter's motive remains unclear. No notes were left, and the testimonies from others are vague. This uncertainty makes it risky to draw general conclusions. It is suggested that the killer may resemble recent acts of violence that were not driven by any clear political ideology.
There is no clear ideology, but Taylor Robinson definitely told us what his ideology is and why he targeted Charlie Kirk. There is no mystery about Taylor Robinson's motives or his political ideology. The question is, who else was involved?
And here are our favorite ladies from the leftist show, The View, or as we call it, Perspective, and its spokesperson, once talented actress, Whoopi Goldberg.
And what assassins should always remember is that just because you eliminate someone, it doesn't mean the message will stop.
So before killing, you need to think, will this murder actually amplify what the victim was saying? Well, I mean, killing, okay, killing, but you have to think if it makes sense. By the way, a year ago, Whoopi had to publicly apologize for calling the organization just fascist. Something like the Hitler Youth God. There are so many idiots and scoundrels in the world. Although I suspect she's brainless, I just think that's really how she thinks. They convinced her of this, and she believed it. And now she's fighting this terrible fascism. But to listen to Kirk once, or read his book or something else, for her, of course. Now, well, you have to stop and start reading. I'm not sure if the actors even know they should know how to read and their roles, although maybe someone just tells them their lines and they just memorize them by ear. And so, here's another host on American Broadcasting Company who showed that Jimmy Kimmel isn't just a coincidence, but rather a pattern on American Broadcasting Company and on other channels too. On this lying, rotten television network, though, they're no different from Cable News Network Microsoft and the National Broadcasting Corporation Columbia Broadcasting System Politics, National Broadcasting Corporation The New York Times, and many other equally slimy and stinky propaganda channels.
What was on it? It was touching, and many of us didn't expect it. An intimate look at the relationship between the suspect and his neighbor, whom he often mentioned and who is transitioning. He called him my love and said, "I want to protect you, my love." This was the duality of a man who, according to the lawyer, endangered Charlie Kirk, the crowd, and did so in front of children, which is one of the aggravating circumstances of this case. Subtitles.
Do you understand that he's pushing forward that this duality, tenderness, and love towards his lover, who is transforming into a girl? Now I do. And at the same time, there's a desire to kill Kirk right in front of his children. He gets sentimental about how tender and wonderful the relationship was between the killer and his obvious accomplice. Oh, by the way, I just remembered, Hitler loved animals. He deserves to be burned for that. And here is our beloved Obamushka.
When does this happen to some people? But even if you think they're, quote, on the other side of the argument, this is a threat to all of us, and we must clearly and firmly condemn it.
You know, when someone says, "I love you, but," or "I'm actually always ready to help," but that means they don't love you and won't help. Barack spent a long time looking for a word to replace "but." And he found one. After all, he does have experience as a speaker.
But, yes, it means loves. It doesn't mean that we can't discuss ideas that people who became victims of political violence promoted.
Well, he just can't get out of his bombastic statement about universal friendship, honesty, and protection and move on to the dirt, to what he really wants to say. He wants to say something nasty, of course.
So I've noticed that lately there's been some confusion around this. And to be honest, coming from the White House and some other positions of power which suggest, even before we've identified who was responsible for this crime, somehow we're going to determine the enemy. We're going to assume that somehow this enemy was to blame. And then we use that as justification to try to silence the discussion around it. Who we are as a country and in which direction we should move.
Once they stopped writing his speeches, he quickly became dull, speaking whatever came to mind. All he wanted to say was, "Don't believe a single word Trump says about the murder of Kirk." It doesn't matter what he says, just don't believe a single word he ever says afterwards. But APC isn't far ahead of its competitors when it comes to lies and disinformation. Cable news network is right on their heels. I would also like to take away their right to lie. So, you know how you can tell if Rabinovich is lying, right? He opens his mouth. So where will Rashkin, Piantkovsky, Sotnik, Pikov, Shenderovich, and Gordon get their information from then? But as people say, a pig will always find mud. Whoever looks for something will find it.
It happened.
Something unprecedented happened. Scott Jennings, the only conservative voice of common sense in a sea of liberal absurdity, completely destroyed his fellow panelists with one simple question. May I ask, does everyone here acknowledge that thousands and thousands of people, ordinary people, went on social media to celebrate this? Yes or no?
I don't know about that, Monique. I don't know. You know what? I don't know. Wait a second. Wait. I just think we need to be objective about this, right? Yeah, I don't think you know the scale. I don't know the scale, but I think we need to distinguish between random people in the world and what is the dominant issue. Why? Because Charlie was shot by a random person, right? I love deeply. That's the danger.
You're ignoring random people in the world. There were political ones. I'll say that. I don't know what to do.
There were political assassinations in this country. There used to be political assassinations in this country. Scott, don't you agree? And are they all disgusting, even in this country? Do you think no Americans were glad about those political assassinations and attempts in the 60s, 70s, and 80s? I think the question is it necessary? Yes, it's not about whether it happens or not. The question is whether we need to put this at the center of our political world right now. And to classify half the people in the country according to those random people we now just see because of the internet.
Yes, you just heard it. You literally just saw it. That was as clear an example of gaslighting as possible. That
is on Cable News Network. A liar on top of a liar, and as the saying goes, it takes one to know one. And when one normal person starts to speak, they immediately try to shout him down, talk over him, or shut him up.
Did you notice how her reaction changed? At first it was, well, we can't know the number. No, you can't know that number, we can't know. Scott, we can't know. And then when the cacophony and chaos and grinding and gnashing of teeth continued, she dug herself deeper and finally settled on, well, do we really want to make this the center of our concern?
When does a political assassination happen, one that was incited by politicians and the media from the left side? Ladies and gentlemen, in this particular case, we absolutely have to stop this. But that means Cable News Network continues to lie and defend the same position. The only reasonable person on this program is Scott Jennings.
You said I feel sorry and I...
You said, I'm angry, I'm angry, and I'm just saying I'm expressing the emotions of millions of conservatives who are angry. They knew Charlie, they loved Charlie. They considered Charlie the voice of the mainstream conservative Republican who spoke about issues that millions of Americans believe in. Monoa discussed his faith by visiting typically liberal university campuses and allowing his opponents to speak, to have what we always talk about. In support of what? In support of what? To have a civilized discussion. Not only that, but also support for the First Amendment. And do you know what he is? He gave people the opportunity to be in a room and talk, and you know what? He was killed when he tried to do what we always talk about. Why aren't we talking? It's been less than a week. You'll need to be patient with our anger towards someone who did what you always suggest, talk, and was killed. Did we give more than a week to the 2 elected officials from Michigan who were killed? Did we? Was it 3 weeks before we decided to say that something was wrong with the fact that Speaker Pelosi's husband was hit on the head with a hammer? It's terrible that this happened to homeless drug addicts, but this isn't the same case. According to local authorities, as Ellie just told us, this is a clear political motivation of a person whom many of us consider dear, whom many of us considered to be someone who was an extreme voice, an extremist.
To Hamlet, for the shoes she wore to the funeral were not yet worn out. And they haven't had time yet, at least Charlie, at least. And the very same people who incited the youth against him, they are once again spreading a stream of filth and lies about him. Here are cable news network's words. Again, lies, manipulations, and vile deceptions.
You said a lot, and we don't have a motive yet. We don't know yet. We're waiting. We've heard what the governors and FBI directors said today.
Of course, we know. Come on, we don't have a motive yet. We don't have a motive yet.
What's happening? That's really Cable News Network's stance. He accidentally fired the gun as a sign.
You can't determine the motive. Here.
Senator, that's not what I said, and I said that law enforcement hasn't stated a direct motive. They presented a lot of evidence here. These messages and what they showed to roommates, told family members, and...
They did. They called him a left-wing activist who hated Charlie Kirk. Sorry.
Senator, with respect, you know what I mean. I'm not debating politics, just noting law enforcement gave no specific motive. Are you aware there's a difference in what they present in legal arguments?
Than what you're talking about. And you're not even arguing. We're not even arguing about the facts, because here, that...
What you just said, that's not true. Caitlin.
Facts. Wait a second. Let me respond to your statement, because what you said is actually incorrect. Senator, with all due respect, law enforcement, with all due respect, you.
So, you don't want to...
Fine, keep sending me statements I never made. That's it. Earlier, we laid out the facts at the start of the show.
We heard from the prosecutor, Ty.
You just said that law enforcement didn't present a motive. That's objectively untrue. They just did. That's objectively untrue.
They lie with all their might and stick their heads in the sand, hoping that the truth will just go away as soon as I stick my head in the sand. Well, aren't they bastards? And then there's Trishrigana. She worked on all the networks. She was a correspondent, a host there, and so on and so forth. She knows them inside out.
American Broadcasting Company News, bye-bye. American Broadcasting Company Network, bye-bye. The Federal Communications Commission is after you. That wasn't Jimmy Kimmel's smartest move, but no one claimed he was that smart. Apparently, they're not very smart at American Broadcasting Company World News Tonight either, because they have a reporter who's just fascinated by these messages, these text messages. Between the guy who took out Charlie Kirk and him, we're going to use the roommate to keep things clean. American Broadcasting Company is about to lose its Federal Communications Commission license. I'll play some audio, revoke American Broadcasting Company's license. You know, you can only push them so far, but they just keep going and going and going and going. You've got that fool over there, Jimmy Kimmel, who thinks he's a comedian and a bad one at that. Besides, I mean, when you have your jokes written for you, buddy. And then he tried to suggest, it's just complete misinformation, that somehow this suspect, who is believed to have killed Charlie Kirk, was somehow, just a Make America Great Again guy, like a Trump supporter. He said, we hit rock bottom with this Make America Great Again crowd trying to portray the guy who killed Charlie Kirk as someone else, not one of their own. And is doing everything possible to score political points on this. Whoa, buddy, and that's why. You know what? Did this get the attention of the person who issues licenses to American Broadcasting Company so they can operate? Brandon Carr has already repeatedly called out American Broadcasting Company because of The View and because of World News Tonight and because of some debates and because of This Week with Georgie Poo. Stephanopoulos is a little guy, who made American Broadcasting Company pay $16 million to Donald Trump and his lawyers because he just blatantly slandered him on air. Well, Brandon Carr is done with it. He's completely fed up, and now he's considering taking some action. He says he has to be careful about how he says it, but you can read between the lines just like I can. And this could be the end for American Broadcasting Company.
Here we are. We've kind of come full circle back to the beginning of our conversation today.
When you look at Jimmy Kimmel's behavior,
It seems like one of the most disgusting acts. As you noted, there are opportunities for the Federal Communications Commission, so there are some ways in which I need to be a little careful, because ultimately we may be called upon to be the judge on some of these claims that arise, but I doubt this is an isolated case. When you go back to Representative Solvell, he emphasizes that Charlie Kirk's killer was a heterosexual white man from a Republican family who voted for Donald Trump. In some circles, there are very deliberate efforts to try to lie to the American people about nature. As you pointed out, one of the most significant and noteworthy acts of public interest that we've seen in a long time.
The left made a concentrated, well-organized forgery to deceive American citizens and voters. The left made a concentrated effort. Well, that means Vostok. From the head of the Federal Communications Commission, the word forgery sounds like an accusation with consequences.
Since
I became the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, I want to revive public interest. Many don't realize that broadcasters are entirely different from those using other types of communication. They hold a license from the Federal Communications Commission, which requires them to serve the public interest. And we can discuss some of the ways we've tried to revitalize the public interest and some of the changes we've observed. But honestly, when you see things like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change behavior to take action, honestly, like Kimmel. Or there will be more work for the Federal Commission.
All right, he said it. We're going to do this the easy way or the hard way. And you know what? If we do it the hard way, that means boom, 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 boom. You lose your licenses, which means all those little American broadcasting company affiliates across the country won't have a license to broadcast your content. I'm sure they'll actually be happy about that. They'll probably save a ton of money. And, maybe Brandon, in his own special way, will make American Broadcasting Company change. Because they won't be able to go on air over public radio waves anymore, and they'll have to stream. Which means they'll really have to show a bit of personality. And maybe honesty, transparency, truth, and empathy, and all those qualities that, let's say, a journalist should have.
Trish said maybe American Broadcasting Company could become. Then she fell silent for a second. Then, not believing what she was saying, she said, "Become honest. By the way, I don't believe it either. Either shut it down or fire everyone. Basically, let them wander in the desert, not just for 40 or 50 years. That means a new generation. And hire new neutral people, not propagandists, and they should know that there are consequences, that you get punished for lying. That would be wonderful." It's been a week since Charlie was murdered. The country is in turmoil. More and more details are coming to light. From a lone shooter to 5 people who apparently knew, then to 20 whom he shared it with in advance 5 weeks before. Then there was a report that an unusual number of cars with out-of-state plates had been coming to the killer's and his boyfriend's apartment for the past 3 weeks. Nothing like that had been seen before or after. And Kash Patel is the director of the FBI. I've talked about him many times already. He said that it's a network, a grid. I don't know how it is there. The web stretches much wider than 20 people. And now the whole web is being investigated and huge FBI resources have been deployed. There is a serious suspicion that the texts between the killer and his boyfriend, which people talked about, oh, how much he loves him, were written and prepared in advance to divert suspicion from the lover about his involvement. There is suspicion that he was shot from the side, almost from behind, and the one on the roof was just a distraction.
Some
Democrats are finally publicly admitting that verbal attacks on Republicans were foolish and dangerous. Calling people a threat to democracy, Nazis, Hitler over and over again for 10 years was extremely harmful. Listen to what Senator Fetterman, one of the few brave Democrats, said on this topic. It's not a comparison. If you don't compare him to anyone, but if you do, you provoke someone to say, well, now I feel like I have to stop this and get rid of them. People seem to forget that the president was shot in the head. And can you imagine if that shot had gone the way it did with Charlie Kirk, what state our nation would be in? Is it such a dangerous time right now? And why shouldn't you use this as an opportunity to share your opinions? Just, again, it's terrible, and give people enough space to grieve. The person hasn't even been buried yet. And that's exactly why we wanted to talk about the fact that we need to find a way to work together. All right. These are two senators from Pennsylvania trying to come together and set an example of lowering the tension. But for him to be the first Democrat to admit, hey, our party made a mistake by using such aggressive language, such elevated language, for me, that's a good start. He
is still the only one. The rest keep shouting about Kirk and Trump, fascists, fascists. But of course, the fish rots from the head down. Yesterday, I told you about Operation Arctic Frost.
Charlie Kirk was targeted too, Joe.
by Biden and the Department of Justice in an attempt to put him in jail for supporting Donald J. Trump. This is another big story that just came out. Senator Grassley revealed that Biden ordered the Department of Justice to go after Donald. Andre, Jack Smith, and others started going after him over the Mar-a-Lago documents and the January 6th situation. But behind the scenes, they also made a list of 92 Republican organizations to target, trying to financially ruin and shame them into disappearing. Turning Point United States of America was one of those organizations. And they tried to put Charlie Kirk in jail before the election so he couldn't talk about then-candidate Donald. I'm going to play this from the congressional hearings so you can hear about Operation Arctic Freeze. It's well known that your predecessor left you with an FBI infected by politics. Today I'll give examples of this, including the release of new whistleblower recordings. At your confirmation hearing, I released recordings that whistleblowers provided to me about Arctic Frost. Arctic Frost was an FBI case opened and approved by the FBI agent Tybo, who was against Trump. Arctic Frost. Then it became Jack Smith's selective case against then-citizen Trump and now President Trump. These new records show that Arctic Frost was much broader than just selective. The case was expanded to include Republican organizations. Some examples of groups that Wray and the FBI sought to subject to political investigation included the National Republican Committee, the Republican Attorneys General Association, and various Trump political groups. A total of 92 Republican targets, including Republican groups and individuals associated with Republicans, were included in the connections. One of the groups on this political list was Charlie Kirk's Turning Point United States of America. In other words, Arctic Frost was not just a case for the political investigation of Trump. It was a mechanism through which partisan FBI agents and Justice Department prosecutors could achieve their partisan goals and improperly investigate the entire Republican political landscape. FBI agents and Justice Department prosecutors could achieve. So today, Senator Johnson and I are making these records public so that the whole country can see them, and I hope that many will be interested to see what the government can do when various agencies have a political agenda. Biden tells the FBI, go after Trump, go after everyone connected to Trump. They're going after 92 groups, including Charlie Kirk. Then the Department of Justice comes in, starts going after them, sending lawsuits and threats. It was a coordinated attack against Charlie Kirk and President Trump. Now it becomes clearer why Charlie Kirk mentioned that he was so grateful for Donald Trump's victory, because he was afraid of going to prison and missing the chance to raise his children. Listen, this is Trump who won Pennsylvania. What made you so emotional that you even cried? I'm curious. When does this emotional response shift from happiness and joy, maybe even shedding a tear for this liberator, to genuine sadness upon realizing it could lead to oppression? Here's why I cried on election night. You saw it as a return to the Judeo-Christian values you believe are core to the country and Constitution. Let me explain why, because I think you as a historian can appreciate this. Joe Biden directed the entire federal apparatus against Turning Point United States of America and me personally. They wanted me to end up in federal prison. That's right. That's what despots do. And Donald Trump, let me finish. And when Donald Trump won, it was a relief that maybe I wouldn't have to go to federal prison. All right, I never fully understood why he said that, but now it makes complete sense. Now the state of Florida is launching an investigation, issuing subpoenas to former Biden administration officials who targeted Charlie Kirk, Turning Point United States of America, and 91 other conservative groups. After that expose, the Democrats used Arctic frost as a program to go after their political enemies. They absolutely tried to bankrupt Turning Point United States of America. They wanted to prevent him from speaking about Donald Trump and conservative values. It's so disgusting to me. As we learn more and more about the corruption in the American government,
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't see an end to this mess that the Democrats have plunged our country into. So what is clear at this point? A massive government program to destroy opponents. Well, it has nothing to do with the United States, our Constitution, Declaration, or laws. All these people broke the law, lied, did things that are forbidden, things that should be absolutely taboo for every American to do. And yet everyone did it. From the fabricated insurrection on the steps of the Capitol, to trials and arrests, to attempted murders through mass surveillance, financial pressure, and now even killings. And the numerous talking heads, both in English and other languages, are trying to convince us that we are the fascists, that it was Kirk, a Republican, who killed, that it's us. We are the ones supposedly trying to bring lawlessness into American life, that Trump is a tyrant, that Make America Great Again wants to take away the country's freedom of speech. Naturally, thieves always shout, "Stop thief," and point the finger at someone else. No, that's the situation in the United States today. The thieves are the Democratic Party, and in fact all of its members, once again all of its members. Because if at this point someone still believes them, then he's either blind or a fool, or maybe both blind and a fool. Maybe he's just a scoundrel and a son of a bitch. Or, as I said, there's a third option. Mentally ill. I don't see a fourth option. Gentlemen, we need to cover up this mess. I wanted to say a word that starts with S, but I'll say swamp, which they call the Demo Party. And to hope that a centrist party will form in the United States, one that also strives for freedom and a free market like the Republicans do, so that we have competition of ideas about how best to achieve a society based on the golden rule. When you don't do to others what you wouldn't want done to you. That is, in fact, the best society that can be imagined for Homo sapiens, for the human race. I'll say goodbye for today. See you tomorrow, redactor.